So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an avenue for demoralization and ultimately to install communism.
Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome. My guest today is Adam B. Coleman, who is an author, founder of Wrong Speak Publishing, co-founder of Thirst Network, author, ambassador of XXXY Athletics, and contributor to the New York Post. That is quite a resume. I'm excited to have you, Adam.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
So before we get into kind of your body of work, let's get into your origin story. So tell me, like, who you are, where you come from.
Professionally speaking, you mean?
Just your background.
Sure. Well, I would say, because I often talk about my childhood, I'm a child from a single parent home. Grew up with my mother and my sister. Moved around a lot. Didn't really have any sort of relationship with my father. Would see him seldomly throughout my life. But that was a big impact for me, especially leading into my adult years of struggling. And so it's a constant theme that comes up when I write about different articles. The lessons that I've learned, especially, up until like my mid 30s or so, having a son at a relatively young age, at the age of 21, while still trying to figure out how to become a man. So these are like pivotal things for me. So when I started writing sort of about politics and sort of social commentary, it was a repeated theme that I would end up talking about these things, or I would notice the same type of issues that I was going through, other people going through, but it's in a news story. Maybe the outcome is a little bit different, but the source is the same. So that's kind of how, that's like the very short origin story for me.
Yeah, I like that. What about kind of the development of your professional life, your writing and things like that?
All of that was sort of by accident. Um, my career background is in IT. And I started from over the phone tech support, and then got into working for multiple companies and for MSPs and things of that nature, doing support for different businesses. And then I was the IT manager for a small business, basically like a one man shop, maintaining everything, all their IT needs. So from that point, that was about 2020. And then we all know what happened in 2020, all the craziness. And so people understand, I wasn't really on social media. I had a Facebook account. I didn't really use it, if anything, to talk to certain people through Messenger, but that's about it. I did not have a Twitter account. I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't really express my opinions publicly. So everything I'm doing today is a complete opposite of what I felt comfortable doing, I should say, 5 or 6 years ago. So from that point, all the craziness was happening. I was wondering, like, am I the only one that feels this way? Started going like free speech forums and things of that nature, and in hearing the discussions and realize I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one that feels this way. And I started writing more, and I got encouragement from people saying like, actually, you should write more often. Because how you express yourself is really good. So, if I was to rewind about a year, somewhere in 2019, I had an idea about writing a book as a legacy thing for my son. Something about questioning things. I sat down for maybe 20 minutes, and that was about it. So getting all this encouragement, and it just felt like the right time. And I felt, from a spiritual sense, like called to do this. So I sat down one day and I just attempted to write a book. It took me, I think, about 8.5 months, start to finish, and published Black Victim to Black Victor. Didn't expect anything from it. Just thought maybe some family members and friends might buy it. My son would read it. I would have been absolutely fine with that. But I did have a strategy, reach out to some podcasts and see if they would care to think about it, would care to be interested in hearing about it. And some responded. And that was basically the start from there. And then it tremendously accelerated once I got on Twitter, started expressing myself on Twitter. And then I tell people all the time, like 90+% of the opportunities that I've gotten were because of Twitter and networking on Twitter. So even writing for Newsweek was because Batya, she was the editor at the time. She saw a tweet of mine, asked me to write for Newsweek. She got me connected with the New York Post, and I've been writing for the New York Post, I want to say, for about 3 years now. Time flies. I think maybe a little bit over 3 years. So, I mean, all of those things were just by accident. My goal wasn't to start a writing career. I just wanted to write a book and see if anybody wanted to read it.
What year was that published?
2021.
So at the time that was published, that was going very much against the mainstream opinion on like race matters. Did you get a lot of pushback for that?
All right. So I caveat this. I say no, only from the sense that I'm not like super famous. So there's not a whole lot of people who even heard about the book. And on top of that, someone who doesn't agree with the book often didn't read it. So, and I can tell. I don't know
what you said, but I know you're wrong.
Yes. They just read the title and they're like, no, yeah, you're one of those black Republicans, blah, blah, blah. So, it ends up becoming what they think you're saying rather than what you're actually saying. So I don't pay those people any mind. I tend not to seek out the people who I don't respect and the people who hate me. So whether I get pushback or not, I really don't care. I don't respond to them. I don't give them much airtime.
What do you think mainstream discourse around race gets wrong?
It's a good question. Where do they get wrong? Oversimplification. Not enough look at demographics as far as where people live. And just straight up like media propaganda, media understanding. But the big thing is the demographics where people live, because most people live in or around cities, right? And large metropolitan areas. So that means that their news sources are coming from large metropolitan areas. And even more so these days, it's primarily coming from New York, DC, and LA, essentially what it comes down to. And these are places where they have a large urban population of Black Americans. That's where they live at. So the depiction of Black Americans is always from these particular cities. And so if there are poor, dysfunctional areas, it's coming from these specific areas. And so these are the people who are poor and are coming from dysfunctional areas, and they happen to be Black. But if you go to, I don't know, Idaho, if you go to, some poor, messed up place in Wisconsin, Montana, or some other place that you would not traditionally associate Black people living at, it looks just about the same. It's just that people live far apart. Things are more spread out. There's not a news truck who's going to come up, 10 minutes after a shooting to see what was going on. But clearly, crime happens in all communities. It's just that the communities are different. And so when I tell people that 60% of Black Americans live in 10 states, I should tell you that we're usually in very concentrated areas, and you can name those states based off of the large metropolitan cities within those states. So when you kind of break things down in that particular demographic standpoint, where people live actually really matters. And this goes to voting patterns. Everyone says, everyone makes it seem like Black people are just in love with Democrats, and that's why we keep voting for them. But if 60% of Black Americans live in 10 states, and mainly in or around 10 urban city centers, and they're heavily Democrat, and many of the cases, Black people aren't the majority population in these areas. There are some outliers like Detroit and Atlanta. But if it's a Democrat stronghold, and then you look at, well, who's running against them? and there are no Republicans running. And it's not like, oh, this is a new thing. This has been going on for many of these places 100 years. There's no opposition. It's just a matter of how extreme the Democrat is running, or how corrupt the Democrat that's running. So it's unreasonable to see people locally vote Democrat, nationally vote Republican. Does it happen? Sure, but it's not likely. So you have these different demographic things, who people are talking to, who people have access to, who do these people even know who Republicans are? And I tried to emphasize this when talking to Republican friends of mine, that these demographics matter because it also shapes the culture of where people are from. Someone who may live in a different area may have a more realistic and friendly viewpoint on Republicans, even if they don't vote for them. And another area might be more hostile, or they have zero idea what Republicans want or think. And so all these things kind of shapes the different culture depending on where people live at. But demographics matter, and these demographics shape how people see the world.
That's very interesting. And one thing that it seems like it's painted as in the mainstream is that Black people in America are very monolithic. They essentially all think the same. But if you look at like a cross section of different Black intellectuals, there's a whole range of different opinions. And just looking at like people I know, I have a friend who's Black who loves Black Lives Matter but hates abortion. And you start seeing all these like very nuanced, kind of diverse range of views that I don't feel like is depicted very well.
Very much so. And it's partly because, who controls the media? And unfortunately, it's very obvious these days. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. It's very obvious that much of the mainstream media sources are overtly biased and overtly biased towards the left. Even the traditional, you turn on ABC, you think you could turn on CBS and turn on the nightly news. You think you're getting like down the line kind of news reporting. But if you watch it with a critical eye, you're like, wait a minute, they cut that part out. Wait a minute, why aren't they saying that? But sounds like an opinion. You start seeing all these little cracks. And maybe it wasn't so overt years ago, but it definitely is now. There's a strong animosity towards the right. It doesn't seem to be, whatever their bias is, it doesn't seem to be being held under cover. So because of that, the people who control the media control how we view the world, control how we understand other people. And I'll say this, one of the reasons why, I could have said, what, these writing opportunities, like, I don't want to do that. I just want to do my IT thing. But a big reason why I started getting into it was because I started seeing who actually speaks for me within the media. Part of the reason I was writing the book is because I'm turning on the television and I'm hearing how every Black person is scared of the cops and every Black person thinks they're going to be the next George Floyd. And it's just like all this other nonsense. And I'm like, hello, that's not me. I'm not worried about that. You know why? Because I'm not a criminal. Most Black people aren't. Like, I'm not worried about the police. This is nerve-wracking and insulting stuff that I'm hearing coming from, and in some cases coming from other Black people who are part of the media. And I'm asking myself, well, why are they saying this? And it's because they're of a certain economic class. They're of a certain, just class in general. They're in a bubble. And so the superficial part is like, well, these are Black people who are saying these things, so all Black people must agree on that. But when I look at them, they're the same people who are social climbers within the media. They're the same people who went to Ivy League schools and hung out with the other snooty Ivy Leaguers. And these are the ones who get to write for the Washington Post. These are the ones who write for the New York Times. So these are the Black people who speak for me, the average working class American who's just trying to do the best that he can to survive. Meanwhile, I'm being told that the biggest problem I face is racism. Because the last time I checked, the biggest thing I'm facing are economic issues. Just trying to go day by day and not live check to check. Unable to purchase a home. All these different things that I'm facing. And go figure, it's the same thing that other people are facing in other races. So this is that's the number one issue as to why we're not seeing each other for truly what we're actually going through. And this division as far as, well, black people have their own interests. White people have their own, Hispanic people have their own interests. Everyone, every little subgroup has their own interests. But when I look at them as human beings, we all care about our money. We all care about our safety. Like, these are the number one things that we all care about. Why can't we unite over those things?
Hmm. I think it was Thomas Sowell who talked about how, when a lot of people say diversity, what they mean is like a racially diverse group of people who all think the same. And like this, like you were saying, like this really is so much more of a class issue, that you've got these highly educated, upper middle class people concentrated in those three big cities, LA, New York, and DC. And they're kind of dictating how we're supposed to think about these issues. And it kind of masks and hides, like you were saying, that elitism and kind of the classism underneath it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an arrogance that goes along with it. Like, the way they kind of see themselves within the world is that I went to Harvard, and Harvard has information that you'll never have access to. But don't worry, I have access to it, and I'll find a way to translate it to you commoners, right? That's the way that they act when it comes to like much of this social justice religion, right? It's that they have access to information that we can't possibly fully understand. And we have to take our time to kind of break this down for you, because I know it's a hard concept for you people who don't have that high of an IQ, but it's okay. We're here for you. You know what? Actually, we'll do it for you. Right? It just becomes condescension, all the way through. But these are the people who are in our media. And I've seen it firsthand. I commentate on it. I watch how they talk about other people. Sticking their nose up at people. Like, it's that stuff, the elitism that exists within the media is my biggest pet peeve. And I can't tell you how many articles I've written for the New York Post where she's like, "Can you have this done?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm pissed off, and I'll have it done in an hour." Because I can't stand the overt elitism. And here's the part I should be empathetic to, but I'm not. They can't see it. Like, this is what they've grown up to see the world. They see the world from an elitist standpoint, that they are smarter, they are better than other people, and that the only way that these poor, unfortunate people, they just need our help, and they can't do it themselves. We'll do it for them, or we're going to be allies to them. But don't worry, eventually we'll take the microphone, we'll start speaking for them, because they're not going to say it 100% correct, and they don't have the experience because they didn't go to Harvard, they didn't go to Princeton. We'll just do it for them. It's okay. I have no problem doing that. Look at me, I'm a good person.
It's like, I'm going to be your ally, but I don't necessarily need your input for that.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And that's what we see all the time.
Do you feel like that kind of smug arrogance is part of what's driven so many people, like working class people, racial minorities, away from Democrats in recent years?
100%. When there's a reporter by the name of David Marcus. David used to write for the New York Post, and now he writes for Fox News. And I got to meet him a couple of times, and talk to him privately. And he's one of the most down to earth, every man, really cares about the average person reporters that you'll ever meet. This guy goes to the middle of nowhere and will go to a bar and sit down and ask some questions because it's going to be in Fox News, right? Really wants to understand what they think, and uses their words verbatim, properly translates what their concerns are instead of minimizes their concerns. And I remember, if I'm just to kind of go back, I remember there were times when the mainstream media would acknowledge that there are people who are in less fortunate areas, who are in middle America, where their jobs were shipped overseas, their jobs were sent to Mexico, Their hours were reduced in their factories. All these things, all these economic issues are happening because of the federal government intervening on their lives. And they're saying, we support Trump because he wants to reverse course, because he at least is saying the thing that we care about. They would take that genuine moment of actual information as to what they care about and would translate that into white supremacy. And I'm just like, this is where elitist ideology just triumphs over the actual message of an American citizen, what they actually care about. If you complain that, hey, those factory jobs no longer exist because there are illegal workers that are there. There are clearly Hispanic illegal workers that came from over the border. It's very obvious. And when they have those concerns because those jobs have dried up where they live at, the chicken factory, right? All these different things that are going on, the agricultural stuff that's going on, all these little industries. Trust and believe, illegal aliens aren't coming and taking journalist jobs, so they don't give a shit. They're coming and taking working class American jobs. They're taking jobs that used to be social climbing jobs. They're taking jobs that used to be a job that you could work and take care of your household. You could have a car, a house, and take care of your 2 kids and your wife. Those jobs are now minimum wage jobs that they can cycle in one Hispanic worker with another Hispanic worker, put in some translators, and pay them minimum wage. So they can say, we're not paying below wage. We're not taking advantage of them. And instead of it being a job where there's 20 people, now they can hire 40 people and pay them less. And guess what? The corporations make out, everyone else makes out, except for the American worker. And that is why the average American is not getting a raise. The working class American is not getting a raise and hasn't gotten a raise in quite some time. And it's because the worker pool has been diluted. And we don't see it in that particular way. And Americans are waking up to it and are seeing what's happening. And that is why Trump has ended up in the position that he's ended up, especially to get reelected after the abysmal failure that was the Biden administration, who did not take it seriously whatsoever. All they did was send Kamala to say, do not come. And guess what? It didn't work. And then them creating all these different app programs where you can just come across the border and just sit here and wait forever, and we'll take care of you for years. And making all these local jurisdictions take taxpayer dollars to house these people who aren't supposed to be here in the first place. The federal government failed to protect our borders. All of these things used to matter to both parties decades ago. Now, if you say we should have borders that are secure, you're xenophobic, you're a racist. And it's like, no, we have borders for a particular reason. And one of those reasons is to protect the working class, is to protect the worker. Because we know what happens when you have one set of workers who follow the rules and another set of workers who don't. And it makes no sense. I know I'm slightly ranting. I'll tell you one other thing. I was talking to a guy who works in construction, and he was saying, because he has his own construction business, he said, I don't do roofing at all because there's no point. I'm trying to do it by the book. I don't hire illegals. I can't afford to do roofing because if I do roofing, that means I have to get an American citizen. I have to pay for insurance. I have to pay for these things. I have to pay them more because it's dangerous work than the average person. But the next company will hire 10, 20 illegal workers to go up on that roof to pay them minimum wage under the table, no extra insurance or anything like that. If they get hurt, they're not going to say anything. And so they can just kill it in roofing, left and right. One set is following the rules, the other set is not following the rules. And the American citizen who is trying to do it by the book, a business owner, is the one who is penalized, not the person who is trying to escape the system.
Wow. So, I mean, this is hurting small businesses trying to do things the lawful way. It's hurting, people trying to earn a living. And it seems like the bludgeon, if you bring this up, it's like you're being racist, so shut up. this is a symptom of white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that the MAGA movement and Donald Trump is kind of an extension of white supremacy in this country?
I see what you did there. No. Now, I will say, I think there are white supremacists that do exist, and they're trying to hijack a movement. But if I'm just talking about Donald Trump himself, he at the very least has been consistent. You can't say that about most politicians. I've seen videos of this man since the 2000s, maybe even the 90s, where he said the same thing, that big problem is China. The big problem is we're not taking care of our borders. We're undermining workers. We need to do these things. He's been advocating for the same thing for decades. Very few politicians you can actually say that about. So when I see the man go up on stage and say the same thing he's been saying since the 90s, I kind of believe him. And now reports have come out that we have a net negative in migration in this country for the first time. I can't remember how far back it goes, but it's for the first time in decades. And the net migration it's twofold. It's referring to legal and illegal migration into the country. However, because I was like, well, is that a good thing? Because if that's talking about legal migration, is that necessarily a good thing? But a lot of that is also it's mostly referring to illegal migration. So he's shrunken it from his hard stance almost immediately coming into power. Border crossings dramatically reduced, like almost non-existent. I had a conversation with someone when we try to compare, and this is one of those things where you have to look at numbers, you have to understand what you're looking at and what these numbers actually mean. People call Barack Obama deporter in chief because if you look at deportation numbers, they're high. But what constitutes as a deportation? If you come across the border and I catch you, I process you and deport you immediately, that's a deportation number. Okay. But if most of my deportation numbers is just me catching you at the border and sending you away and not getting the guy who did get away and who's been in the country for 10 years, then it seems like I'm just kind of breaking even. But now we have very little border crossings, which means that most of the deportations are coming from actual people who are within the country. And on top of that, because of his hard stance and where he's not playing around, we have self-deportations that are occurring. We have Donald Trump offering to, I can't remember specifically, it might have been to Venezuelans or it might have been to different groups, saying that if you apply for this and you self-deport and you stay out of the country for X amount of time, we will allow you to apply to come back into the country to do it the legal process. So it won't be a forever ban because you broke the law, right? So that is advocating for people to make it easier on the government, just leave. Because what he's saying is eventually we're going to catch you. And so now all of those deportations, which used to be just catching people at the border and just recycling them over and over and over, him going after Mexico and saying, you're going to get tariffed really hard unless you help us stop this issue, magically it just slows down. Huh. Funny how that happens. You mean these people who came all the way from the south of Mexico, walking all the way through in caravans, and no one in law enforcement stopped them, arrested them, deported them, anything like that. And magically the man says, I'm going to essentially tax your country a tremendous amount unless you do something about this. And then it just stops. Huh. It's almost like they could have done this a long time ago. But they had no reason to. So, that's the level of seriousness that he is taking. But by doing these things and by being serious about it, we're going to start seeing, I think at some point, the working class finally being advocated for and being able to take advantage of opportunities. we'll start to see if this keeps up, and obviously we'll see what happens when Trump leaves office, who the next person is. If that person is just going to wipe away everything that he's done and say open borders, and then we start seeing a flood of people again, and get rid of all the tariffs and all these things, we'll see. But if we can stay on this course, then we may finally see the working class be advocated for to get their jobs that they actually wanted, to get the factory jobs that used to exist for them, to encourage companies to not ship their stuff to China, because guess what? They're going to steal your intellectual property anyways. Why don't we find some sort of tax incentive for them to stay within this country and help American citizens, rather than risk their products be stolen and resold on the China? And one last thing, a massive, massive thing that happened, I think it was within this past week. China has been getting away with ridiculous shipping rates, basically since, I want to say since like the 70s, since they started trading with the West. I want to say it was the 70s. It might have been like with Nixon. But they've been getting away with extremely cheap shipping rates since then. And they've been taking advantage of it. And they've been flooding our economy with cheap Chinese crap and getting away with it. That's why in many cases it was cheaper to buy from China than it was to buy within their own states. And it's because we made the pathway so cheap that it was affordable for them to do anyways. We finally got rid of that because it was a rate for developing nations. Well, China is no longer a developing nation. And letting them have that is like an economic killer for the United States. So China's had this disadvantage forever, and it's finally gone. So we'll start to see the decline in cheap Chinese crap that comes here. And that void that was being filled by cheap Chinese crap will start to be replaced by either American goods or friendly country goods that we're importing. But China has been our number one competition, and we've been acting like they haven't been.
Mm. You know, when you talk about the immigration issue, I feel like the response from the left is like, is this a nice thing to do? And I feel like the way you're framing it is like, is this a fair thing to do? Because there's so many people, including some of my friends and family members, who say, you know, who immigrated here and say, like, I did things the right way. I don't know, like, why, you know, it's just perfectly fine for this person to just not obey any of the rules that I did, right?
Right. No, they're absolutely right. There definitely is a fairness aspect. There are many aspects when it comes to legal immigration that any one person can hone in on. I have a video that I'm going to be working on very soon, breaking down what illegal immigration actually looks like in New Jersey. So if you want, I can kind of explain that to you.
Yeah.
So in New Jersey, they dubbed the warehouse state. We have a ton of warehouses. Down the street, I have a number of warehouses. Just a couple blocks away, there's a number of warehouses that are here. They're in urban areas, rural areas, and suburban areas. They're all over New Jersey. And the reason I know that these particular warehouses, and especially like the one down the street from me, is a food company down the street from me, they use illegal immigration. They use illegal immigrants to as workers to pick and pack, to process food, to do all these things within these factories. And I know this because I used to consult with a particular company that would often put me inside these warehouses. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand what is happening here. They work with third-party companies to fulfill these jobs. Everyone is a contractor, right? No one is a direct employee of said corporation that is hiring them. And so everyone can play ignorant, right? Oh, you know, we just contracted with them and they contracted with this person. And so everyone just plays stupid and ignorant. Meanwhile, their entire workforce, 99% of these people don't speak English. So they have translators who are there, who work with these third-party companies. And everyone knows these people don't drive. Why don't they drive? It's because they don't have licenses. And they can't, well, theoretically, they can't drive because it's illegal for them. Some people do decide to drive regardless, but they're not supposed to because they're not legal citizens here, so they can't legally drive. So they don't drive. So that's why they stay in high urban areas where they can catch the bus and take public transportation. So if they need to take them from one urban area to a rural spot to work a job, well, they set up transportation to bring them over there. So there's vans and buses that bring these people back and forth every single day. Now ask yourself, I've worked at a number of jobs. How many times has your employer set up transportation to pick you up and take you home? Never. Like, that's not a thing. But it is a thing if you're an illegal immigrant who's in this country, you can't drive, and we need to get you to a specific spot from point A to point B. So yeah, they might set that up. And I should say the employer, right? Because it's technically not the employer, it's a third-party company, and the third-party company is the one who's doing all this stuff. So everyone plays stupid and plays ignorant about what is happening here. But it is very obvious, and I've talked to some of these people, and they know that these are illegal immigrants. The other part is E-Verify. E-Verify is something that employers can use if they actually want to check your status. Now, if you're a company and you can pay 30, 40 people to come in at minimum wage to do your job, are you actually going to check to see if they're legal? I mean, because they're technically not your employees. It's a third-party company's employees. So are you going to do those things? Well, of course not. And the vast majority of them don't check E-Verify. Nevertheless, and this is statistically so, that the vast majority of illegal immigrants do some sort of paper fraud, whether it's fake social security numbers, whether it's a fake ID, whether it's their cousin's name, whether they took someone else's name and made IDs, whether you're working with a cartel, gangs to help with this black market type of paper fraud. But it is very, very common amongst illegal immigrant populations because they have to do certain things to stay within the country. So if I show up at a third-party company, no one checks my ID, no one verifies. I mean, it looks like me. Maybe it is my picture, but maybe it is not my name. How would you know? You don't verify anything. And I can just give you a social security number. I mean, maybe that's my cousin's social security number who is legal. Like, you don't know. Maybe I'm taking on someone else's persona. No one's checking anything. And this is ultimately the problem. Everyone just kind of pushes papers and turns a blind eye as to what's going on. But what I will tell you is this: those old areas from when I lived in New Jersey from years ago that used to be majority black or very much so mixed are now almost entirely Hispanic. Those jobs that would go to people of different backgrounds are being 100% catered to the illegal Hispanic worker. They don't care that you don't speak English because they have someone there who will translate it for you. And they will rotate through people over and over and over, and they'll pop in people from one job to another job and move them around. So that is what is happening. And all these different jobs, and I'm telling you, it's all over New Jersey. And I can name companies, which I don't, because I don't want any sort of liability issue, but I can name companies that you will know the names of that use illegal labor. And I know this 100% because I've been inside their factories and I've seen their labor force. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out what exactly is going on here.
It seems like the left wants to avoid the word illegal, like just stay away from that word completely. Using that word makes you xenophobic, etc. But what you're describing here sounds like massive fraud on a nationwide scale.
Yes. And at least in New Jersey, firsthand experience, I could say in New Jersey, there is massive amounts of fraud. And I will tell you this, there was never any fear that ICE was going to bust through in some warehouse. There was never any fear of that. There was never any talk, concern, hey, in case this happens, nothing like that. And that's what I'm saying. It's a lot deeper than one particular politician in office. It's a lot deeper than Biden being in office and not taking this seriously. It's an entire system of either incompetence, abject failure, or purposeful ignorance when it comes to protecting the average American worker and choosing not to go after these particular companies, that honestly, if you want to stop this type of thing that I'm talking about, at least in New Jersey, you do a bust and you find the hell out of this company and they will stop doing it. If you hit them in their pockets or threaten them with prosecution, if you go after the third parties, they'll stop. Because they're like, the risk is too great. But if you go in there and bust them and then take out the 30 illegals that you got them for, and then tomorrow they just put in another 30 and there's no penalty, no one doesn't, then they're just going to keep doing it. So there actually has to be some sort of punishment for violating the law. And so what I'm asking for, like you said, 100% is fairness. But along with illegal immigration comes human suffering. That's the part that I think we really don't talk about. It's very easy to talk about the economic side of illegal immigration, especially from the worker side. But I cannot stress enough the amount of people who are extorted, who are trafficked into the country, right? They pay the cartel $10,000 to get trafficked in, and then the cartel says you owe us another $5,000, another $10,000, and they'll extort them for however long. They'll threaten to kill family members of theirs, even before they make it across the border. It is known. Even NBC has reported on this. I wrote about this. NBC has reported about how it was a known thing that they might get somebody coming through Mexico, and they would find out that you have ties to the United States. You have a brother in the U.S., a cousin, someone, and they say, money. And they'll make you call them, and they'll get on the phone and say, you send us $5,000 or we'll murder them right now. And they don't play. And one particular guy they talked to, I think he was a Honduran national. He was there with his daughter. And they did that to his brother, and they talked to the brother, and the brother's crying because he thought they were going to kill him. And the man that was being extorted, who had his life threatened, was talking about how the cartel was murdering people in front of him and would force him and others to eat parts of the body to get rid of the body. So this is the type of people that we're dealing with. This is the amount of human suffering that we're dealing with for an industry revolved around human trafficking and human suffering just south of the U.S. border. So this is a real thing that is happening. And that's just one aspect. We didn't even get into the sex trafficking of women and children, the brothels that popped up all over New York City, just on the other side of the river from me. Like, all these different things were happening, being controlled by cartels and gangs, forcing women into sex slavery. There's so much black market, illegal, and human suffering activity that stems from one massive problem of just not controlling your borders and allowing for massive amounts of illegal immigration to come through here. Talk to people, one particular man down in Texas, where one day he's living in an apartment complex, just very average, middle-of-the-road complex, no massive issues, and then the next day it is overrun by Venezuelan gangs. And come to find out, it sounds like a lot of that was funded either by certain organizations or by the federal government, or the federal government funding the organizations to place these people there. And ultimately was forced out of his home because Venezuelan gang members were waving around the gun in front of, pointing at his wife and his kid, and having to basically run across the state to go towards another set of family to protect his family. So you have all these things that are happening just to regular people, and you have all these things happening even to the very people that are trying to come here, whether it's for a moment or whether it's for, they want the American dream, whatever reason, they're being exploited too. The entire system is exploiting these people. So it is a massive, massive issue. So that is why I'm extremely grateful when, as imperfect as the man is, when Donald Trump decides to come into the office and he actually, from day one, promises to do something and he actually did it, and he wasn't bashful about it. And he said, Mexico, do something about it or I'll tariff you. And I went, no, you can't do this. It doesn't work. And guess what? It worked. Like, it worked. Because no one else thinks of actually caring about the United States to actually use our leverage. Our leverage is our economy. Our leverage is access to our economy. So yes, you want access to the United States, then you need to play ball and protect the United States too. Don't allow for cartel members to just allow caravans of people to come through Mexico into the United States. It's also not fair to those people who think they're going to get one thing when they show up here and it's something else completely.
Wow, that seems like a very strong argument that you just don't hear much in the mainstream.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could tell me, switching gears, about XXXY Athletics.
Yeah, it's started by Jennifer Say. Jennifer Say was an executive with Levi Jeans. Got canceled during COVID because she stated the obvious that the COVID restrictions are ridiculous and we're hurting children. You know, real white supremacy stuff. Yeah, she's decided to start this brand, and I think she's done a great job as far as the quality of the products. I've shirt, my wife has leggings. Like everyone that I know has XXXY products actually really likes them. And she doesn't play around, and she's very serious, which is why when she offered the opportunity to work with her on her first campaign, a part of her first media campaign, on the website, you'll see me in the shirts and everything. Like I was like, yes, because she's a serious person. I know she's going to take this seriously. And she did, and she's doing a great job. I talk to her every so often. Sometimes I see her at conferences and things like that. I think she's a very, very strong human being and an admirable woman. And I think her moment of vindication was being invited to the White House, and standing next, not directly next to, but standing behind the president, when he was signing his executive order, protecting women's sports. So, these are the type of people that I've been very fortunate to associate with. And Jennifer, I think, is an absolute wonderful person. And I'm glad to know her, and I'm glad to call her a friend.
Why do you think it's important to protect women's sports?
Once again, fairness. You use the word. And it's common sense. Men, on average, are stronger than women. And there's all different types of biological factors that come into play. And so the reason why we have women's sports and men's sports in the first place is because there is a difference. We want women to be able to compete. But if we just had women competing against men for everything, unfortunately, it would not win anything. The amount of accolades that they would receive would be near zero, unless some sort of anomaly was to happen. And so, no, we don't want a system that doesn't allow them to actually excel on a fair playing ground. And we talk about fairness within sports. Listen, if one guy is taking performance enhancing drugs and the others aren't, that's a fairness thing that we're talking about. And he's competing against other men. And especially when it comes to sports, when you're talking about the difference between a runner winning a race, we're talking about tenths of a second, right? So any sort of small advantage is a massive advantage. If you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, if you're taking some sort of drug that you shouldn't be taking, and that just gives you a little bit, that's enough to bring you from third to first. And that changes everything. That changes the entire dynamic. So when we're talking about biological men competing against biological women, it is a massive difference just on its face. It's why you can take a mediocre male athlete and he dominates against women. It's not even close. Was it William Thomas, also known as Leah Thomas? Decent swimmer on the men's side. Doesn't sound like he was winning a bunch of accolades. Wiped the floor with all the girls. And everyone stood there and clapped as if we just embarked on a new venture. Oh, how miraculous, how brave of Leah to wipe the floor with a bunch of women, as he's clearly bigger, stronger. Like, has all the advantages. Just a year ago, had short hair, was William, and now you're like, oh, he's always been a woman. Of course, yes, of course. And it's just, okay, fine. If you want to live that life and you want to say, I am Leah, call me Leah for the rest of my life, cool. That's up to you. But the problem is when it intersects with everyone else, when it intersects with someone else's ability to excel, someone else's ability to receive some sort of accolade, that's where the problem is. I don't care if someone wants to identify as trans. And so for me, it's not transphobia. For me, it's about fairness. If they want to go and if they want to start a trans league and race against each other, have at it. At least it'd be somewhat fair. And matter of fact, I would be so fair. I would be like, trans men can't compete against trans women. It's unfair. All right, there has to be trans men versus trans men versus trans men, trans women versus trans women. Like, keep it fair, 100%.
So you used two words a minute ago, common sense. And so much of this, like you're talking about looking at Leah Thomas and thinking like, gosh, what a goddess. She is just amazing. You know, so much of this seems like a concerted effort to suppress everything that you know is right. Don't pay attention to your eyes, listen to the experts. Do you see kind of that mentality?
1000%. That's why I always bring it back to Yuri Bezmenov. I don't know if that name sounds familiar to you.
They're the chess champion?
No, Yuri Bezmenov, he was a former KGB, I think he was an officer, but he used to be part of the Soviet Union, but he was a propaganda expert. And the big thing that he talks about is demoralization, in the areas of demoralization. And basically, it was tearing down the norms. It was calling the norms into question, replacing one thing with another thing that would cause dysfunction. And so what is more basic than men are stronger than women, or that men have penises and women don't? Like, there's nothing more basic than that. And so we were brought to the point of basic biological truths, and even supposedly highly educated people arguing, well, sometimes it's like, wait. and then try to muddy the waters and muddy the conversation, and getting into arguments about gametes and all this other nonsense. All of that is to call everything into question, and is to muddy what we know as true, to bring us to the point where we say, well, sometimes, well, maybe we're not 100% correct in this, or maybe we need to rethink this. It's to call everything into question. But the entire purpose is to demoralize us all, demoralize us, and call the things that we would call as norms, the systems, biological truths, how we interact with people, how people see the world, call those things into question, call all institutions into question, and to demoralize the system so that we can replace it. And replace it with what? Communism. Right? Because that's what they would do. That's what the Soviets would do. They would find a weakness. They would find an area, or find several areas, to infect with new ideology, to call things into question, to make people say, we had it all wrong. And so that they can inject something else within it. So that's how demoralization works. And I see this particular discussion over biological truths. It's not that, have there been men who thought they were women for years, decades prior? Yeah, of course. But no one ever tried to argue that they were actually biological women, right? And that's the difference. No one was trying to advocate for things that is like, all right, yeah, it's a dude who wears a dress. He thinks he's a woman. You know what? That's his business, and just kind of keep him moving on. Understand he's has some mental thing going on. That's just what it is. Doesn't mean you should ridicule them. Doesn't mean that you should, lock them away or anything like that. But that's them. That's what they're doing. But now we're being told that that person actually has always been that. No, that's not what that is. Um, so that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an avenue for demoralization and ultimately to install communism.
Hmm. So far, we've talked about race, politics, trade, immigration, gender identity. What other kind of stuff do you write about?
Family. Actually, that's the thing I mostly write about. Family, fatherhood, um, you know, raising children. Well, I say children, but I have one son. Um, Raising a son to become a man. Um, my son's 19, and so it's different having an adult son, and trying to navigate that. He'll be 20 in October, actually. So just like, um, to answer your question, family. Family is a big thing that I write about. Essentially, what my last book, The Children We Left Behind, this just came out in April. That's what it's all about.
Hmm. So I have one final question for you, and that is, when you look at society more broadly, what is one issue that we're not talking about enough that we should be talking about more?
Family. um, Specifically, it's not enough to say fatherlessness, because it's not just that. I think it's everything when it comes to family separation. The idea that some parents are optional and that you don't really need them, or you turned out fine. The adults get to act recklessly. They expect the kids to respond to the world like adults. The adults get to act like children, be whimsical, chase love and chase dreams and do all these different things. No longer like this person, not willing to humble themselves and work things out. They just say, you know what? I'll replace your father with another man, or I'll replace your mother with another woman. We now have step parents. And that's, you know what, that's better than what we had there. Using children as emotional pillows, just throw everything in their direction and hoping that they can withstand it. Um, I can't tell you how many times I've seen where adults convey way too much personal information to children, and essentially having them become their confidants and their children. So you see a lot of this, and all of that links to family separation and the big social issues that we complain about, whether it be homelessness, drug addiction, violent crime, or just general criminality, sexual promiscuity. Most of the time you look and it's linked to some sort of family separation dynamic. So whether they're coming from a single parent home, whether they're coming from being children of divorce, foster care, all these different situations all indicate some sort of family breakdown. And I can't tell you how many times I've written articles and I've had people reach out to me either saying, that's my story. I've had people who worked in juvie who told me that 99% of the kids that come into juvie come from broken families. If someone told you 99% of the people who do a particular thing get cancer, you'd be like, you know what, maybe we should look into that. Maybe we should take that seriously. And I think that's the case. So obviously, when it comes to criminality, I never got into trouble. I never went into prison or anything like that. But it's like smoking. By smoking, you increase the likeliness of getting cancer, but not everyone who smokes gets cancer. So why don't we decrease the rate of family separation so less children end up in jail? Less children grow up, become adults who get thrown away and put into jail. We'll have less neighborhood tyrants. We'll have less people who terrorize you, who steal from you, who take from you. Less sexual promiscuity. We'll have more women who know what to look for out of a man, instead of landing on these men who don't care about them and procreate with them and create more family separation. And the cycle continues over and over and over. So, for me, my personal story is really important within the book because my story is much more common than the guy who ends up in jail or the guy who lands on the street. But well, the problem is that when someone sees me and they say, "Well, you turned out fine, Adam," then it becomes like, "Well, then it's not that big a deal because ultimately you turned out fine." And it's like, no, there's a path of suffering that I went through that I could have easily killed myself. I could have easily made a choice and gone elsewhere. And I didn't, and I'm still here and I'm thankful. But it doesn't mean because I seem okay now, doesn't mean that my path to get here was easy or that anyone else's path to get to that point is easy. I had a friend of mine, I was talking about this stuff, and a friend of mine conveyed that he doesn't know who his father is, and it still bothers him, and he's a dad, and he takes being a father really seriously, partly because he doesn't know who his father is, but there's a piece of him that feels empty because he never had that father figure, and his mother is basically not helping him to figure out who his father is. It's like withholding information. So he doesn't feel whole. And that's a massive, massive struggle for especially a young man who's looking for his male identity from his father to not fully understand him. But that's how even though I know who my father is, I never felt that connection. My father felt like a stranger to me. So I understand where he's coming from, even though I know who my father is. So there's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of excuses and distrust, a lot of rationalizing of bad adult behavior because it benefits the adults at that moment. They don't have to be accountable. Everyone just does what they want to do, and YOLO, you only live once. But what about the kids? Because the kids don't get to make any sort of choices. Whatever bad decision you make, guess what? Your kids come along with you. So, just because your kids survive doesn't mean they're thriving. And I think sometimes we confuse the two.
So I had 3 different women on here who answered that question similarly, talking about broken families, but you're the first man to answer it that way. And I really appreciate how you highlighted that issue. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
So Adam, where can people find you?
Everywhere. Substack, adambcoleman.substack.com. I have my Twitter at wrong_speak. I have a YouTube account. I'm posting up videos. I'm trying to do, 2 videos, I would say, or so a week. YouTube.com/@wrong_speak. And trying to put up high quality, thought-provoking videos. I got a new one coming out maybe later today. We'll see. Talking about how communists use the Black community as a playground. So yeah, I think people can check me out. I'm all over the place sometimes with the post, but just look out for me.
Awesome. I love this conversation. I thought it was fascinating. I would talk to you again anytime.
Yes, I had a good time as well.